I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're donning our favourite shell, sharpening our fork, and consuming some MSG, as I rank the bosses of Another Crab's Treasure, a new Souls-like 3D platformer by Aggro Crab for PlayStation 5, Xbox, Switch, and PC. You play as Krill, a young hermit crab who has his home stolen by a loan shark, and you set out on an adventure to retrieve it. A simple premise, but it works for the story they're trying to tell. To defend yourself, you have to use whatever makeshift shells are at your disposal, each with their own shell powers you can break out if needs be. You also have combat adaptations unlocked upon defeating certain bosses or other objectives, which give you more powerful abilities to wield in battle. All this combined with a robust skill tree that will feel very familiar to Souls players. You've got parries, advanced melee attacks, upgraded dodging, the works. So let's not waste any more time and dive right in. All 20 Another Crab's Treasure bosses, ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 20, we have Voltai the Accumulator, the main boss of Scuttleport. Voltai is a giant electric eel who powers the whole facility, and we need to defeat her so we can claim her power for ourselves, as we need her electricity to power a boat needed to catch up with the antagonists. On paper, Voltai is an interesting boss. She pokes her head out of one of 4 corners of the room, and depending on where she's standing, she can power up appliances nearby that attack the player. She starts off with a hairdryer that fires electric bolts, but I had the rubber band stowaway attached, so the electricity didn't do any damage to me. She can slam you with a chin attack when you attack her up close, but it's a predictable attack that, had I been a little more cautious with, I could have parried for very easy posture damage. She'll sometimes burst out of her hiding place charged with electricity in an attempt to ram you, but it was so telegraphed you'd actively have to get hit to get hit. She has a toaster that she fires never-ending supplies of toast out of, don't think about it too hard, which you have to platform up to reach her face. And after half health, the floor will fill with poison gunk, which can be avoided via the platforms in the center of the room, which is ironically the safest place from most of Voltai's appliances. I was expecting something big for her final appliance, but it was, let's just go with a massage gun so we don't get demonetized. It floats around her as you approach, but's really easy to slip around. Ultimately, Voltai's gimmick just doesn't really go anywhere. Everything she can do is far too easy to avoid or handle for the point of the game we're at. It's a shame, I really want to like her, but she's the only fight in the game where I just felt a bit let down.
Thanks for playing with me.
At number 19, we have Nephro, Captain of the Guard. The first main boss of the game, this justice-loving sheriff wants nothing more than to make you pay for taking a shell for yourself. His moveset is pretty simple, revolving around the concept of jousting, except he is both the horse and the rider. Wielding a deadly plastic straw, you have to use your new soda can shell to block his damage and strike when you can. This fight happens before you gain your umami abilities, so you can't use your soda can's fizzle spell to do extra damage yet. It's purely a fight that teaches you about blocking attacks by hiding in your shell, something that is extremely valuable for the rest of the game. I'm personally a dodge roller in Souls, it's what I prefer, so getting humbled and being told, no, block please, was a welcome challenge. His moveset is relatively easy to deal with, aside from that grab, which can be deceptively tough to dodge, especially if you're close to him when he launches it. My roommate also played through the opening hour of the game and was constantly getting caught in Nephros' grab to the point where it felt overpowering. He's balanced out by the fact that he spends a lot of his time turning in a circle though, not attacking, which gives Krill tons of time to get hits in or swap to a new shell. Overall, it's a good fight, but it's the only battle in the game where you don't have access to your shell spells, and that makes the fight a bit less exciting compared to the others as a result. No fault of Nephro though.
You can't outrun the law forever.
At number 18, we have the diseased lycanthrope found early on in the Expired Grove. This is the player's first introduction to the lycanthrope enemies, who appear throughout the rest of the game. Their main abilities are to suck up the player, chewing them up and spitting them out, while also having mastery over gunk, this game's poison. He's a very aggressive boss, having some devastating close-range melee swipes that can be parried if you've unlocked that ability. He can jump into the air, landing atop you and spreading a puddle of gunk around him as he does so. And perhaps most dangerously, he can summon baby crabs that act as minions for him during battle. When you have multiple enemies to worry about on top of a boss trying to inhale you like Kirby, it can be pretty tough to focus on the right objective. And while it only happened once in my run, he is able to also consume the crabs he summons, healing his health bar slightly. But with the hammer upgrade on the skill tree that allows Krill to stick shells to the end of his fork, there really wasn't much the lycanthrope could do. His moveset's fun for the early game, but looking back, having now fought so many of that enemy type across the rest of the levels, it's not really anything special. Love the design though, the watering can looks so goofy in the best way. At number 17, we have the Curdled Carbonara Connoisseur, a boss hidden behind a polluted waterfall in the Expired Grove. The next 3 entries are all very similar, because they're all crab-based mini-bosses found in the first 3 major areas of the game. They all have a similar alliterative naming scheme, and they're all based on the same model, just with different weapons. Of the 3, the CCC, as I'll call him, was the least memorable. I like that his fight was hidden. I like that he uses a broken pot lid as a shield, providing him some defense against my strikes, and those tongs he uses as a weapon are not to be trifled with. Well, I'd like to say that, but aside from getting smacked a few times, I didn't find him all that threatening. His design is gorgeous, with the spilled carbonara Chinese box atop his head, and he's got a goofy little face that makes me want to squish him and frame a photo on my wall. But he only has a couple of attacks, and aside from his crushing attack, which can take a moment to learn the timing, you're going to avoid most of his kit. I wish I'd been grabbed by him at least once, because the grab animations for this game are phenomenal. I was just too good in this instance, I guess. At number 16, we have the polluted platoon Pathfinder found at the end of the Moon Caves, just before the Moon Snail. Like Nephros from earlier, the PPP is a tutorial fight designed to help you battle with your umami shell abilities, as well as teaching the player about crushing attacks. If you're about to be grabbed, a red crab icon will flash above you like in Sekiro, but crushing attacks have a blue crab icon that flashes above you, which means if they connect, they'll do massive damage and very likely destroy your shell, so you have to dodge, run, or jump out of the way to avoid them. Because you haven't got access to your umami skill tree yet, you can't parry the Pathfinder, which means you have to keep up the block and strike strategy while shooting him with either the fizziness of a can or the explosive force of a party time. I always appreciate a boss that helps me learn the ropes, and because the PPP allows Krill a bit more of his moveset, it feels like more of a fun fight than Nephros. This ultimately led to my winning attempt that I managed without taking any health damage, just one blow to the shell and nada más. Really satisfying and a fun early game challenge that had me interested in what else Another Crab's Treasure had to offer. At number 15, we have the Scuttling Sludge Steamroller, the final of our 3 crab mini-bosses found near the docks of Flotsam Vale. Unlike the other 2, the Steamroller is a genuine threat, able to wield gunk and cover the large arena, inhibiting your movement space. He has the same overall moveset as the Pathfinder, but makes up for the similarities by using his paint roller to coat the ground in gunk. If you stay in it for too long, it activates a poison effect that can be brutal, as there's no way to heal it without having the correct healing shell. Plus, your movement speed is lowered. so if you get gunked, you may as well let the boss kill you and just go again. Dying to bosses in another Crab's Treasure isn't a pain because you always get the option to respawn right next to the boss arena. Thank God this is becoming industry standard now. But gunk isn't a hard status to avoid, so if you're playing well enough, you likely won't even trigger it during the fight. The Steamroller ultimately provides a decent challenge, and that's all I need to give it my thumbs up. At number 14, we have Inkerton, Roland's Right Claw, the first encounter with this rogue squid when you first enter Flotsam Vale. Unlike other entries on today's list, this technically isn't a full boss fight. Inkerton will attack and attempt to dissuade you from entering Flotsam Vale, but upon getting him to 75% health, he'll vanish, exclaiming that we're not worth his time. His proper boss fight comes later, but that doesn't mean I didn't want to include this brief interlude. I think his appearance is a big surprise. I wasn't expecting it, and he helped me to better understand the parry system as his melee attacks were perfect to counter. Had he brought his gun, maybe we'd be facing more of a roadblock. Still took me around 6 or 7 attempts to get through Inkerton here because he hits like a truck and is meant to be stronger than us from the jump, but managing to make a little bit of headway was more than enough for me. I think it's meant to hint that there are other ways to power yourself up as the player, and if you're struggling, to seek them out, which ultimately led me to a different boss I'll get to much later. All I'll say for Inkerton, he's probably one of my favourite characters and designs in the game, so you can imagine when I reach his proper fight, it will be one of my highlights.
Not worth my time.
At number 13, we have the Ceviche Sisters, found at the end of Flotsam Vale's Submerged Cavern. Honestly, I wasn't expecting a boss fight when I dropped in here, seeing 2 prawns and thinking, ooh, more regular enemies, only to then see that they had beefed up health bars. That being said, it doesn't change the fact that the Ceviche Sisters are just regular enemies with beefed up health bars. They didn't have any attacks that were any different from the regular gun-toting prawns I'd fought up to that point, and the challenge was in needing to manage 2 of them for an extended period. The trick was parrying, as I had a few attempts where I tried to just rush them and do quick damage, which didn't end well in the slightest. Once I took my time, had a breath, and focused one sister down, isolating her from her sibling, I had a much easier time. They can either fire one large shot or a cone of smaller shots, alongside a few melee swipes for when their target's getting close. Honestly, I should have just shielded more often, then I'd be fine. In fact, I'm certain I could handle this pair far better now that I've fully experienced what this game has to offer. I am a little disappointed though that the sisters didn't have custom voices. They have the male-sounding damage noises like the regular enemies, so I wasn't even getting sister from them. Something about their fight felt a bit out of place, but was a solid enough gameplay challenge and a fairly lax end to this part of Flotsam Vale that I wasn't complaining too much. The cave leading up to them though was absolutely brutal to me. Thank God I could respawn over the boss arena. At number 12, we have Kamcha, the Bleached King, found in the throne room of the Bleached City. One of the final bosses in the game, I was really hyped to face off against this ancient crab from a civilization long past. He attacks with sand waves you have to jump over, and his deadly toilet brush that you can block or avoid. Not a particularly hard first phase, but even more so for me because I didn't realize I had the perfect setup for this boss. Using the Royal Wave adaptation at its highest level, which causes enemies to take more damage for a short period of time, as well as an endgame shell that has the Twist Top ability, which allowed me to regenerate my umami, I could continue this combo for as long as I wanted until Kamcha was defeated and it couldn't do a thing about it. Only, like with the regular crab enemies of this area, Kamcha then molts and is reborn to take us on in a second phase. His attacks here are more perilous, wide-reaching, and his grab that ended my first run was downright traumatic. I told you, those animations were fierce. You have to beat both phases of the fight in one go to succeed, so if you die to Kamcha Reborn, you have to face the Bleached King again. So I used my broken combo to get through the first phase, and then continued doing it in the second phase on top of some charged attacks to do balance damage. Basically, I was a fully upgraded Krill. There wasn't much the king could do to stop my onslaught, and it felt good. Thematic that I was able to slay this crab so easily, halting his cycle of rebirth. Though it also means that this boss fight isn't going to stay with me, as it didn't really challenge my technique I'd built. Maybe I got lucky with this build, who knows. Great cinematic moment, just not my favorite boss fight. At number 11, we have Roland Venture Crabatalist, fought at the edge of the drain atop his pinball barge. Now, I had my suspicions that there were more to the game than the treasure hunt storyline, but I wasn't expecting Roland to be the boss of the halfway point, nor was I expecting to fight him before Inkerton's main fight. He attacks us in a giant pinball machine, and his ability to curl up and bounce around the bumpers gives him a good amount of movement to confuse the player. I was able to keep up with him in that regard, instead struggling with blocking his hard-hitting attacks. I was glad to see a thimble with Fortify in the arena, an ability that allows you to withstand 3 attacks from an enemy with no damage, and the capsules were clearly encouraging me to roll with the punches and copy Roland. But I didn't use the pinball machine gimmick myself because I felt my own strategy was a little more sound. Open up the fight with 2 Mantis punches to get a quick stun, then focus on blocking attacks, parrying when I can, and charging up my Mantis punch so that I can stop him from using his rolling attacks. Roland killed me more than most though, because his melee attacks came out fast, a rapier moveset that meant I couldn't really run away. I'd have my shell break and go into panic mode because Roland was always good at catching up to me before I could sneak into a new shell. It was a really fun challenge, and I loved his ultimate attack where he pulls out 6 different Allen keys and uses them all to slice and dice. The music was a bop, I'll be listening to that one on repeat. The arena was one of the most unique in the game. I just wish it was easier to play around with those pinball elements. The capsules being the main shell you can equip gave the impression the developers wanted players to use the bumpers and triggers to move around, but I just found it so awkward to control I didn't really want to try, and it would always put me in a worse position, and I think that's why this fight lands out of the top 10. A great concept though. Did you know we're trying to reach 35,000 subscribers by the end of the year? After the rest of this video, consider parrying that subscribe button to help us out with that goal. Or consider becoming a channel member. It's $4.99, you get early access to future videos, and shoutouts at the end of each video as well. Links in the description. Back to the list. At number 10, we have the Royal Shell Splitter, the last of the game's mini-bosses, found in the southeast of the Shallows. Like Nephros, the Royal Shell Splitter is a lobster who rides around like on horseback, but focuses more on close-range melee attacks to deal damage. Dressed like an executioner with the dark trash bag and chains over his head, and wielding a large makeshift guillotine, he makes quite the first impression. By roaring at the player, it can build fright, which, when it fills up completely, causes Krill to run away, hiding in his shell. You can still roll to an extent and can control your movements, but you'll be forced to flee the creature that frightens you until the bar goes down. This fits thematically with Krill's feelings at this point in the game as well, and is a tame introduction to the mechanic. The real reason I remember the Shell Splitter though is that guillotine. If the boss gets you in his grab, just watch. The moment I saw this, I knew this game had style. It's not afraid to kill characters in particularly gruesome ways, especially when with some grabs you have Krill begging for the creature to stop. Beyond that, I just think the Royal Shell Splitter is well balanced, provides a simple moveset that can be punishing if you play carelessly, and has a great enough design to stand out among some of the main bosses on the roster. A great first impression goes a long way with me, and the Shell Splitter is a fight I will remember for a very long time. At number 9, we have Magister, Tyrant of Slacktide, the Duchess for whom your shell was initially stolen. The moment I met this character, I clocked that mace in her claws immediately, mentally preparing to fight her later in the game. I had no clue about this game's plot, so I assumed we'd be going to various different locations to get our shell back from Magister. Instead, Slacktide is ransacked by the Gunk straight away, and she becomes the first true boss fight of the game where we have access to our whole moveset. Her design is flawless. The age 30 tiara got a chuckle out of me, especially when learning later in the game that 30 is actually old age for crabs, and her voice actress had a flawless performance. She uses Gunk like some of our previous entries, vomiting it out onto the floor as she backs away, giving her a built-in ability to keep her distance from the player. Combine this with her mace that gives her a great long-range attack, and you've got a boss that truly ups the ante. I love that her grab actually traps Krill inside her mace, so she can launch you in a direction of her choosing, and that she can coat her mace in Gunk, so that when she throws it towards you, it leaves Gunk puddles as it lands. And of course, like every good Souls-like, she's got a super Beyblade attack at low health that almost caught me off guard. Yet despite her aggression, she feels super manageable to fight. I probably could have blocked more, but that's a read that comes with experience. I think I'd find her just as fun to fight on a second playthrough, and for me, that's the most important factor. Also, her boss arena has pillars, and we all know the best Souls bosses have pillars. Sure, they can be destroyed, but they're just so majestic.
Tear it all down! Return it to the waves!
At number 8, we have Prayer Dubia, the Ocean's Agony. This is the creature who has been whispering to the player ever since their fall into the Unfathom. The so-called god of the ocean, a being who awaits at the center of the whirl for all those to fall into it. I didn't know this before researching for this video, but Prayer Dubia are real-life sea creatures. I think it's only fitting that for the god of this world, the devs picked a sea creature that lives in some of the deepest depths of the ocean. And in terms of design, I think it's probably my favorite boss from a visual perspective. It controls Chiton, a character that Krill has come to know and respect as the game progresses, so it's up to us to take her down and then defeat that which is controlling her. Now, for the penultimate boss fight of the game and the main antagonist of our adventure, I was a bit disappointed in how easy the fight ended up being. Phase 1 has Prayer Dubia spawning in minions which you have to kill, and then once slain, the boss itself lowers down, allowing you to attack. Here's the one problem I had. I was too powerful. I'd done a lot of exploring prior to reaching the old ocean and had fully upgraded my fork by the time I got here. I'd done the same with most of my adaptations as well, I had tons of whirl, so Prayer Dubia could barely hold a candle to me. One Mantis Punch, a Royal Wave to do a little extra damage, and my regular attacks was enough to almost destroy the boss in a single cycle. Not even Prayer Dubia's cool sword beam attacks could hold a candle to my fully upgraded pointy boy. When it rises back up, it begins casting lasers, but I only had to Royal Wave the enemies it resurrected as my most effective crowd control attack, and I was fine. Phase 2 was way more fun, as the boss turns into Prayer Dubia, the Final Scream. Because rather than fighting the boss, your mission is instead to simply survive for as long as you can. Prayer Dubia attacks you with all of its might, slowly losing health as it does so, pleading with you with its monologue, trying to make you understand. It's a time challenge that allows you to use a hermit crab's best assets, fleeing and hiding. It's quite fitting, even if I feel it's a rather abrupt end for this presence that built itself up as a godlike creature. I was hoping to fight it up close and personal as opposed to through chitin, but at the same time, I still really enjoyed the fight and the lore that went with it. It wasn't what I was expecting, but what we got was satisfactory. At number 7, we have Pagurus the Ravenous, found in the hilariously named The Sands Between. Pagurus is a unique boss, as he isn't found in one specific location. Instead, he's designed to appear any time you leave the safety of the markers in the area. He chases you as you attempt to make it to the Expired Grove and Flotsam Vale, and let me tell you, he is terrifying. The knife and fork attached to his pincers are the stuff of nightmares, and the way the music gets intense as his life bar appears, not knowing which direction he's approaching from, left me genuinely unnerved. Do I risk grabbing an item, or will he get to me before I can reach it? I was convinced this boss would be a late game fight or a super boss who we're not supposed to fight or go after, but no, as it turns out, after completing Flotsam Vale, we have to slay Pagurus to progress the story. Fighting him the moment you leave Flotsam though is a bad call, as you'll likely be a bit underleveled and underpowered. You don't want him to catch you in that grab where he slams you down and eats you with the knife and fork, do you? For me, I had to explore the Expired Grove, coming across a character who helped me learn the Mantis Punch adaptation, and with it, I had a heavy damage dealing attack that allowed me to feel comfortable going up against Pagurus. He's aggressive, does a ton of damage, and can cause the frightened status fairly easily, but at the same time, once you've got the upper hand, he's as tough as any other crab boss, and as long as you don't let your guard down, you will come out on top. It's the way he's introduced, acting as a barrier as you go from early game to the mid game, that really does it for me. And though I didn't test this out myself, I did read a comment on the game that explained you can feed Pagurus bananas, and as he's allergic, it will do damage to him. If this is true, that's absolutely brilliant. Whether you choose to go and get stronger, or do the classic Souls move of throwing your head against Pagurus for 2 hours until he goes down, you're gonna remember this hungry crab. At number 6, we have the Consortium. Found as an optional encounter in Flotsam Vale, you have to learn the Mantis Punch adaptation, break this block in Expired Grove, and follow the structures grappling over to a pathway that leads to Flotsam Vale where you'll find the boss. The Consortium is a gimmick fight that takes full advantage of the setting to create a wholly unique experience. You run into a giant fish trap that is overflowing with captured fish, crabs, an octopus, and more that all want to escape. But of course, none of them are of sound mind, and thus it's up to Krill to break the green rope surrounding the cage to free the wildlife. Each side of the cage has a different creature that's ready to attack Krill. You've got a large octopus tentacle that tries to scoop Krill up and swipe at them, with another tentacle holding a flare gun that creates a large fireball explosion when it impacts. You've got countless crab claws, lobster claws, the works trying to snip at you, and the cage is constantly trying to crush you beneath it, ram you from the front, and more. What's cool about this boss though is that you can actually climb the cage. There's climbing out on the back, or you can grapple using the hooks in the arena to get some height. Since you're tackling ropes on all sides of the cage, being able to position yourself like that becomes extremely important and useful. I definitely fought this boss at the right point in my playthrough, as it hit hard and took me quite a few tries, but didn't feel insurmountable. I hadn't fully grasped how to use my moveset to the best of my ability, and I think had I not found this boss until the end game, it wouldn't have made as much of an impression. I kept exploring future areas hoping I'd run into another optional boss like I did the Consortium. However, both the Unfathom and the Old Ocean were very straightforward in that sense. But for completing the fight, you do get the Tactical Tentacle adaptation, allowing you to summon a tentacle to help you in combat. Result. There's nothing else in the game like the Consortium, and that is for the best because it leaves the fight feeling fresh and unique. At number 5, we have Aaviier Intimidation Crab, the main boss of the Expired Grove that you have to defeat to progress the story. People have known about this fight for a good while, as it was one of the featured challenges in the game's demo, and they made a good choice showcasing him back then. Aaviier for me was one of the toughest fights in the game. He's insanely aggressive compared to the battles you've faced thus far, and he's got a tanky amount of health and balance that leaves you needing to really think about your strategy when facing him. But what's interesting is that he doesn't attack fast, he just hits insanely hard, to the point where you'll be losing shell after shell while Aaviier barely breaks a sweat. Because while you're attacking him, he'll go in for a grab while you're animation locked, and suddenly he's slicing your throat open with chopsticks and tossing you to the side. Or maybe he'll turn away, showcasing his terrifying back that builds your fright meter. If you get frightened during the fight, Aaviier always punishes, and it can be brutal trying to avoid the status effect given how quickly the attack comes out in battle. At half health, he breaks his chopsticks apart, having that classic cheap chopstick issue where they don't snap evenly, and that arguably makes him even angrier, thanks for that. With 2 blades, his combos get more aggressive, you have to dodge inwards to his stomach during his crushing attacks, and you have to withstand more hits when he swings at you, which means your shells are more likely to explode. But if you've mastered blocking and you have a useful shell like the Thimble, whose Fortify skill can protect you, you'll be able to handle Aaviier. We need those difficulty spikes to overcome, it's part of the genre, and all that sushi on the side of the arena for extra healing certainly doesn't go amiss either. I just hope I'm saying his name right, I hope someone could maybe confirm that in the comments for me.
Wait!
At number 4, we have Petrock, the False Moon. The build up to this fight is genius. After all, you've found yourself in this pitch dark expanse. Unable to teleport back to town, your friends trapped down here with you, you're barely hanging on as it is. And finally, you see a moon snail shell in the distance. You approach, but I immediately figured something was off because of the suspicious boss arena-shaped area it was in, the various shells around that I could equip, and the fact that I couldn't progress further without activating it. Oh no. Petrock uses the basic Hermit Crab moveset, which can already be pretty hard-hitting at the best of times, while innovating with the use of these glowing crystal shards it can summon from the ground. There are multiple variations to this form of attack, and I found it really satisfying to figure out which attack was coming and how to dodge them effectively. The boss also has the ability to hide in its shell, which is perfect for blocking my mynameispunch strategy and forcing me to play a bit smarter, a little more cautious. No need to be wasting umami when I can wait for Petrock to poke his little head out, mwahahaha. And he can use his rollout attack to try and ram into Krill. For me, this was actually the easiest attack to punish because the rollout attack is just slow enough and the tracking just wide enough that I can circle strafe around him. But because Petrock has a solid health pool, the fight then becomes a battle of attrition. Can I whittle down his HP before he eventually catches me off guard and destroys my shell? The answer, it was closer than you think. I really love the idea of a fake save point, something I really think the Souls game should try and mess with themselves at some point. So honestly, props to Aggro Crab for getting there first. At number 3, we have Inkerton, Crab Hunter, found at the end of the Unfathom. When we rock up, he has just killed his employer, and is now falling to the madness of the gunk. But before anything, he has a score to settle with us, and while we don't want to fight, we've got no choice. Inkerton in this fight wields an actual tool for cracking open crab shells, alongside his party popper gun, and I was worried he'd be an insanely tough fight. And initially, I thought he was. His attacks hit devastatingly hard, and his combos and aggression were enough to have me confused for my first 2 attempts. But then I saw his patterns, and I decided I needed to try parrying him like in the first encounter and take this fight a bit slower. Sure, my mynameispunch strategy still came into effect, but it wasn't my primary damage dealer anymore. Inkerton's gun was the easiest to avoid, as it's just learning the timing of the shot and then repeating that dodge anytime he uses it. His melee attacks were what I needed to block and fight through. Didn't expect his grab to literally be him breaking my shell open with the crab claws. Horrifying moment, not gonna lie. I love when he starts squirting ink to try and hide his movements. You can generally figure out the direction he's in if you're close enough to him when he does it, but it gives him a chance to get a shot off on you if you're unlucky and keeps the player on their toes. He doesn't have a large moveset, but all of his attacks hit hard, and while they also have solid counters to them, you'll only pull those off with the right skills. Royal Wave really became one of my best adaptations in the late game due to its ability to increase damage on the target for a short time, and I regret nothing. Just a really cool fight with a really great build-up and payoff that actually left me a little bit sad that I had to kill him, even if it was the right thing to do.
Roland, you bastard. Seems I'm as worthless as you.
At number 2, we have Firth, the crab who stole the whirl, the final boss of Another Crab's Treasure. Now, I wondered for the longest time what happened to him following the reveal of the initial treasure chest. I was hoping he'd actually come to Krill's aid, having realized how badly he'd treated the hermit, and maybe have the pair taking down Prayer Dubia together. Instead, Firth appears afterwards, claiming the power of the old whirl while Krill is tending to chitin, and being the tech bro, crypto bro, bro character he is, Firth isn't willing to give up that power, and so we have to stop him from dropping Trash Island onto the top of New Carcinia. Interestingly enough, the final hour of Another Crab's Treasure reminds me very heavily of Devil May Cry 5. You defeat who you think is the main villain, the one built up as the antagonist, but then the reveal is that the final boss of the game is a mirror match against your rival. Firth goes mad with power, and has all of your abilities on top of that. The Royal Wave, the Shrimp Pistol, the Tactical Tentacle, and all this on top of the ability to warp around the battlefield, attack with insanely fast speeds that you have to learn to parry to stand a chance. He can summon a weapon made of trash that is easy to parry but impressive to look at. And his damage is insane. The developers did not hold back with the difficulty, and I appreciate it. It's rare that the hardest fight in the game actually ends up being the final one, but for me, Firth fits that bill. Here, I put all my focus on the Shrimp Pistol adaptation, as I could fire it like a Gatling gun to build up balance damage, or max out his balance bar if I noticed it was high enough. He can hide in the whirl to block some attacks, but that's just a challenge of patience. Then, when Phase 2 hits, he becomes Firth, Avatar of Waste, gaining more spiritual tentacles that he uses to great effect, and perhaps more deadly than that, he can summon up to 3 water spouts that bounce around the arena, proving to be one hell of a nuisance if you get unlucky enough to be caught in them like in this footage. Not to mention those water spike balls that attach to your shell if they touch you before exploding, water mines if you will. It's all about keeping up with his fast speeds, and if you can, you'll find your way to victory. I'm just a bit sad that Firth gets crushed at the end when you wake up in the lower crust. He wasn't a good person, but I still think he had the potential to be redeemed, and getting his ass beat by Krill, in my opinion, was already enough. People just have to keep moving with their lives, and I wasn't expecting the cute crab game to hit a little too real at the end there. I am glad we got to beat Firth up though, he did have it coming. But there's one boss that just enamored me from the moment I first met them, and that is our number 1.
And what better way to start than to beat up a selfish, greedy, muscle shocker like... Yeah! Wait!
At number 1, we have Grove Keeper Topoda, the true boss of the Expired Grove. Hidden past the Curdled Village and up the mountainside, he protects the grove from outside threats, and when Krill walks up, he mistakes him for a husk and the fight begins. I loved stumbling upon this boss because I could tell the story wasn't pushing me to explore the expired grove further, and yet I was curious. I kept climbing. I went through a village with a sniper trying to murder me, I went over some cliffs, I found some items, and I was rewarded with the sultry, spicy voice of this mantis shrimp. Hello! So why is Topoda my favorite boss? To put it simply, he doesn't hold back against the player. He uses his mantis punch ability, which has this cool glass shattering effect on the environment. He's bantering with you as he fights. He's aggressive and he does a lot of damage both to your health and your shell. At half health, he has an incredibly cool cinematic attack where he spawns in a giant cyclone, attacking you up to 3 times before it dissipates and the fight continues. Going against him one-on-one is tough, and learning his parry timings is something I would love to try again moving forwards, but what I loved is the way that the shells in the arena taught me the best way to fight him. There are crab husks everywhere, and the crab husk shell's special skill is decoy, which means you can discard the shell once it's near breaking point and use it as a decoy for Topoda to attack, allowing you to get some hits on him from behind while he's distracted. It's the one boss battle where I feel the recommended strategy the game is feeding to you makes complete sense with the gameplay. Let's take Roland from earlier and the capsule balls in the pinball machine as an example. I knew what the game wanted, I just couldn't make it happen, it was too finicky. Here with Topoda, I knew what the game wanted and I could make it happen. I didn't feel like I was cheating the system or being dishonorable or any of that, it felt very correct. And even with the decoy strategy, it came down to my last bit of healing and a single bullet from my shrimp shot adaptation. Also helps that the arena is really nice, love the greens and blues, the colors and the design of the boss is just adorable. I've seen pictures of mantis shrimps and they are the cutest little babies and he captures that essence perfectly. Just my favorite boss, and color me excited when I realized after beating him, he was also the NPC who levels up your adaptations. Hallelujah!
Seems like I'm still out of practice. All skills fade with time, I suppose.
And that's my list. Have you guys played Another Crab's Treasure yet? Let me know what you think of it down below. I really would recommend it. I'm gonna leave a link in the description. Thank you so much to Aggro Crab for creating this game. I had so much fun. I really enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the gameplay, I enjoyed the bosses, the areas, the designs. You guys did an amazing job and I will definitely be keeping an eye on what you guys do next. So thank you so much for such a fun game. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter, my Blue Sky, or my Discord, they're the only ones there. And a massive shout out to my channel members on YouTube. You guys are supporting this channel every month. You can become a channel member for $4.99, you get early access to all of my videos, and a shout out here and in the description. So thank you so much, I will see you guys next time for another video. Adios!